Namaste, this is Sri Yashua, and with Mind, Body, and Soul Talks. Today on Mind, Body, and Soul Talks, this is one of our first talks actually, and we're going to be covering Vedic knowledge. And what is Vedic knowledge? So, a lot of times, words get thrown around, especially in the modern religious sectors and spiritual sectors, that are really broad terms that come from ages of colonialism. They come from the Dark Ages. They come from a time in mankind's history where the true understanding and the nature of these spiritual practices and these different paths to God realizations, just they really weren't there on par with what we have now or what was before. To that end, there's a lot of words that have came about to describe different religious practices and groups of knowledge that are just they really fail to give anyone really accurate information on what these things are. One of these words that is commonly thrown around is Hinduism. So what is Hinduism? Hinduism is a term coined by the Islamic Caliphate and later by the European powers that came to take over these areas for a period of time. And really what it came from is that there's this river, in India, the Indus Valley River, a very famous river. And so from the people who lived in what we call the Middle East's perspective, the people who lived on the other side of this river were the Hindus and their religions. Now this is the most interesting thing about this. From their perspective, their religions was called Hinduism. Later on, drop the I, add the H, Hinduism, and we get some other vernaculars. When you really look at what the Vedic peoples, which would be the peoples they were referring to, actually worshipped and understood, there's over 200 million gods within the Vedic religion, Pantheon. And actually, from a Vedic perspective, all of the gods and goddesses and all the beings and angelic forces that exist within that Vedic Pantheon, just different branches and parts that exist on different planets, on different densities of reality, or shlokas, as they're referred to in Vedic understanding. So, really with that, when we talk about what is Vedic religion, well, it's quite literally everything. The Vedas, the word Veda, it means knowledge. So this is just the knowledge, is the Vedas. So a Vedic religion, a Vedic peoples, they're peoples who follow the Vedas. So that means you follow knowledge, you follow wisdom. Well, what is this wisdom? It's the wisdom that, is bequeathed to Lord Brahma, to whatever creator force you can conceive of, at the beginning of the material creation of the universe. That's what this knowledge, this Vedas is. So when one actually is coming into understanding Vedic knowledge, or trying to actually understand what is Vedic knowledge, what are these concepts, what are the chakras, what is yoga, it actually is the source of everything. In the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And this is reflected in the Vedas and said in the Vedas, and these understandings of enlightenment, these understandings of the movements of creation, they all stem in this knowledge and understanding. So from a Vedic perspective, India was never called India. That's another really important thing. It's called Bharat. So Bharat had a lesser Bharat and greater Bharat. Lesser Bharat extended out into the area to which would maybe be known as Persia or Samaria, out and into the Philippines and around and up across, Nepal and Tibet and the region of that area. Lesser Bharat extended even further out, all the way to reaching Siberia, parts of Europe, Russia, China, the swath of the Philippines, down to touching the parts of Australia, coming back up, all the way around. So this entire, what was known as the Lemurian Island Network, and this entire geographical, region was all the way to Egypt, mind everyone. There's all this in this same region from the Vedic perspective. So if you really want to look at what these Vedas are telling, the history they're telling the history of the world. The Ramayana, which details the incarnation of Lord Vishnu's incarnation of Lord Ram, was accounted about 9,000 years ago, around 7,000 BC. So what we have is a very distinct follow of information from the fall of Atlantis into our what we would consider our contemporary history, pre-classical era, ancient era history. We have a clear rewriting of anything that maybe been said by modern physical historians, modern scientist historians, who would try to claim that around this era and region time, these people didn't have these technologies, they didn't have this. Well, if you clearly look at the Vedas, it very clearly tells you that they not only had spacefaring technology at this time, capable of plotting out the exact distance from Earth to every single planet in the solar system, down to two decimal points of difference comparative to modern scientific instruments, which you account for a 9,000 year change in planetary cycles. This difference is actually negligible. To their use of advanced agriculture, advanced healing technologies, performing cesarean sections, performing cataract surgeries, performing a myriad of different surgeries and medical performances and techniques that after the decline of this Vedic civilization weren't seen until the modern era. It's very clearly self-evident that what we would what we would say maybe is Hinduism actually is much more expansive. That really, at the end of the day, there's no clear defined difference, because there is not one, between Egyptian studies and practices and the Vedic peoples of India, the Buddhism, Taoism, Jainism, the Druidry, Tingrism, which is the pre-Islamic spiritual practices of the Turkish steppe people, Mongolia. All these practices, the reason why they have these similarities, Tibetan people's practices, pre-Buddhist Tibetan practices. Why all these practices are so synonymous and similar is because at one point they were just different branches of a singular practice. And really, when you look into what this practice is service. It's a practice of service unto God, onto the positive polarity of life, onto light, onto coursing towards light, with the inevitable goal of unifying with oneself, one's true self, which is a form of light. No matter what, any of these faiths that I mentioned, or even the faith that wasn't mentioned, Judaism, another one, the big one wasn't mentioned. They all have the same goal. You're passing on from this physical form, which is temporary. There is another life after this physical form that is eternal, that you go back to after your temporary existences. Those are fundamental concepts that, in many of them, you come back if you haven't learned lessons. That's a maybe restricting concept in some cases. But it's still the understanding that reincarnation is a factual part of existence, that the life that we live in these bodies is a temporal life, but that we are actually eternal beings, and that our nature is eternal, and that our nature is truly love. These are the fundamental understandings that are actually provided throughout a study of all of these different what people could call legions of information, or in our modern day re-legions, reworking of these structured informations that are given by beings of higher light and consciousness from higher realms and higher planes of existence and other planets. But to that end, for a moment, we're going to read a bit of the Bhagavad Gita, which is a section of the Mahabharata, which is a scripture that dates back around 5000 BC, that details the Mahabharata War, the greatest war in post-Atlantean human history, where there was over 120 million combatants across 86 square miles of battlefield. In this war, Lord Krishna, the incarnation of Lord Vishnu, had descended down to the material world to take past time to remove a very large amount of what's called demoniac, negative polarity forces from the planet. These beings of very high consciousness, but wanting to serve themselves. They were here and rife all over, Bharat, and Bharat's capital, and because of that, it was causing issues across the planet. So the chapter we're going to read from is chapter 12, and it's called Devotional Service. I'll be reading the Sanskritam or the Devangari, and then the English. Evam satanam yukataye bhakvatas tavam paryapasate yakape akasaram avakatam tesam ke yoga vetara. Arjuna inquired, which is considered to be more perfect, those who are properly engaged in your devotional service, or those who worship the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested? So, this is Arjuna, the best friend of Lord Krishna, and he's inquiring on this battlefield to the Lord about which is more of a perfect style of worship. Those who approach the Lord directly, or those who, maybe see the Lord as being, God as being this, is everything, this everythingness, this effulgence of pure conscious energy sitting in void, and it's unmanifested. That's what a lot of beings would call Brahman. That's what they would call God. And we move on to text 2. Sri Bhagavatam Uvacha me avase manoye mam nitya yukyata upasate sardahaya parayapase teme yukatan mamata. The Blessed Lord said, he whose mind is fixed on my personal form, always engaged in worshiping me, with great and transcendental faith, is considered by me to be most perfect. Ye tiv arkasam anadarasyam avakyatam paryapasate sarvatargam achinnitam ke kuntasan akam darhavam sanajanam yajandara garam sarvata sama buddhate parampate vanti maeva sarva bhute hartaratya. But those who fully worship the unmanifested, that which lies beyond the perception of the senses, the all-prevailing inconceivable, fixed and immobile, the impersonal conception of the absolute truth by controlling the various senses and being equally disposed to everyone, such persons engaged in the welfare of all at last achieve me. So, the Lord is telling us very clearly that one who worships the impersonal can also achieve him. The one who worships the personal, they can also achieve him. So devotional service unto the Lord, no matter what pathway you're doing, it will lead to, that absolute truth. Very quickly, saving the Sanskritam for this first part of the video to round it out, we're going to read the last of what the Lord has to say on this. For those whose minds are attached to the unmanifest and personal feature of the Supreme, advancement is very troublesome. To make progress in that discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied. So it just means that when you're in the physical body, it's harder. But that's going to round us out for today. I've been Sri Yashua. I love you all.
Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok, or even text our phone number.